Paul Stanzik, and this is the Hello Operator podcast. Thanks for listening. Hey, I got a really nice text from somebody this morning, college teammate of mine who was a public markets investor for a long time, who now is doing the search fund and entrepreneurship through acquisition thing. Shout out to Tyler. Thank you for the text today. You made my day. Here's what he texted me. I just wanted to let you know that your Complicator versus Simplifier article has become mandatory new hire reading material and general hiring criteria for me. Thank you. Excellent work. It's really good. Hey, I work on a lot of marketing stuff. I love sharing social proof. Tyler, thank you for giving me the social proof. I appreciate it. I think there's a reason this Simplifier Complicator thing was my most read article in 2025. It resonated with a lot of people. I've had more than a couple people tell me this gave me language to describe something I've been thinking about for a long time. If you haven't read my article, it's on Substack. If you haven't listened to the podcast, it's one of the first episodes that we put out. And let's say you like this idea of simplifiers and complicators, and it helps you describe what a good person on your team does differently than everybody else. What do you do with that? How do you actually hire a simplifier? How do you assess a simplifier? That's what today's episode is about. This is something we incorporate into almost every interview process across our portfolio today. And the best people that we hire, they're simplifiers, not complicators. So I'm going to read you my hiring guide on how to hire a simplifier, which also starts with an old classmate of mine reaching out and asking me for some advice. So here it is. Thanks for listening. This is how to hire a simplifier. How to hire a simplifier, the pass-fail interview guide that tests for my number one leadership quality. A few months ago, I wrote about simplifiers and complicators, the two types of people you'll inevitably run into at work. Simplifiers make things clear. They cut through noise, they take a stance, and they drive action. Complicators, they make things murky. They create friction, add steps, and somehow leave you with more questions than you started with. That article turned out to be my most read of the year. Turns out a lot of people agreed with the idea that work moves faster and feels better when you're surrounded by simplifiers, and that nothing grinds progress to a halt quite like a complicator who conflates complexity with competence. But after I published the piece, I kept getting asked the same question. How do you find these people? How do you spot a simplifier before you hire them? And more importantly, how do you avoid letting a complicator slip through the cracks during an interview process? My friend Carlos, CEO of accounting automation company Tesorio, put it best when he asked me, what do you change in your hiring process to separate simplifiers from complicators? Carlos, great question. And as someone who has accidentally hired complicators before, painful, and seen firsthand what happens when you bring on a world-class simplifier, joy, I've got an answer. Maybe I'm giving away a bit of a secret here, but I also think the way that I test for simplifiers in interviews is almost impossible to cheat if you dig deep enough and if you ask the right follow-up questions. My approach boils down to a simple two-part interview guide designed to test whether a candidate can first simplify and then execute. The Simplifier Interview Guide. Question 1. The first question I ask is, tell me about the 3 to 5 metrics you look at every week to gauge the health of your part of the business. This is not meant to be a trick question, but it is revealing. It's designed to see if the candidate can distill complexity into something clear, actionable, and meaningful. A good answer here is all about focus. You're looking for a short list of metrics that tell the truth about how the business is actually doing. Bonus points if they include at least one leading indicator, showing that they're tracking what's coming, not just what's happened. Here's a few other notes on what I'm looking for in their answers and what to watch out for. Good answer. They take a stance. They've clearly thought about their KPIs and which ones are most important. They can rattle them off without hesitation, and it's clear these numbers aren't theoretical. They're burned into their brain. They can explain why these particular metrics matter, how they track them, and what the numbers tell them about the state of the business. You can tell by the way they talk about them that they don't just present them in board meetings. They're talking about them with their team every week. The classic bad answer is a laundry list. They mention, quote, all the usual ones, like revenue, bookings, new logos, etc., without any sense of priority. It's clear they either haven't thought deeply about their metrics or they haven't developed the discipline to track the business in a meaningful way. Worse, they default to trailing indicators, which are useful for keeping tabs on results, but less so for staying ahead of the curve and alerting them when their part of the business is heading off track. Another thing to listen for here. Simplifiers think in terms of signal, not noise, and their answers reflect that. Question 2. Once we've gotten through that list from question 1, I hit them with the following. Okay, now tell me about a time you noticed something in those numbers, you dug into what you saw, and you made a change as a result. Be specific about what you noticed, what you dug into, and what you did. This is the question that shifts from simplifying to taking action. Simplifiers don't just spot the signal, they do something about it. They roll up their sleeves, figure out what's going on, and do the work that's needed to move an important number in the right direction. Here's what I'm listening for in their answers. Good answers, more than anything else, are specific. They can clearly describe what they observed in the numbers and in the real world, what triggered their curiosity, and how they dug into the issue. That digging in part is the critical part. Simplifiers are clear, but they're also curious. They don't just notice things, they do the extra work to understand why those things are happening. They can clearly articulate the changes they decided to make based on what they noticed, why it made sense, and the results they achieved. Even better, they can explain how they ensured the solution stuck, whether it was through a process, a system, or good old-fashioned personal reinforcement. Bad answer. Complicators will talk in abstractions and concepts and will avoid specifics at all costs. You know that scene from The Matrix where Neo's dodging the bullets? It feels a lot like that. Their response is long-winded, filled with buzzwords and qualifiers, but it never actually gets to the point. They might try and hedge, hoping I'll give up and move on. And the test here is if you find yourself feeling impressed at the volume of work, complexity of the problem, or how badly the deck was stacked against them, but also confused at what they actually did and why while they're talking, that's your complicator radar sounding its alarm. Pay attention to it. How to spot a complicator in the wild. There's this Doc Rivers quote that I absolutely love, and I probably quote way too often to people in my portfolio companies. Here it is. Average players want to be left alone. Good players want to be coached. Great players want to be told the truth. Most complicators, they just want to be left alone, which is exactly what they're trying to get you to do during an interview. They want the stories they share to seem so messy, so complicated, so difficult, that you lose track of what they actually did and whether it worked. It's like they're playing a video game on hard mode, narrating every obstacle, every unfair battle, every impossible challenge, so that by the end, you're too exhausted to ask the only question that matters. Did you actually win? Like an outmatched prize fighter, their only hope is to get you to chase them around the ring, hoping that you'll eventually run out of steam. Simplifiers do the opposite. They take a stance. They make the complex feel obvious. They aren't afraid of being specific because they've put in the work to refine their thinking and reflect on the decisions they've made. And once you know what to ask, and once you know what to pay attention to, you can improve your ability to spot this dynamic playing out in real time. You can actually see the simplifiers float to the top of your hiring process. Here's a nuanced way to start honing your simplifier spotting ability. Interviews are hard for everyone. Everyone struggles to tell their story in the right way. But next time you're interviewing someone, pay attention to how they struggle. If they're working hard to answer your question as directly and thoughtfully as possible, that's a good sign. That person is probably a simplifier. But if they're working hard to dredge up all of the things, the obstacles, the drama, the dozens of variables that made it all so hard, odds are they're a complicator. It's like they think the sheer weight of their struggle should count as an accomplishment. Spoiler, it doesn't. And this pattern doesn't stop once they're in the job. Just like in the interview, complicators don't actually want to deliver results. They want to deliver just enough confusion that you don't notice they aren't delivering results. Final thoughts. Hiring well isn't just about finding high performers. It's about finding the right kind of high performer. You don't want people who do a lot. You want people who do the right things, do them well, and can clearly articulate what they're doing and why. That way, they can get others on board with what they're doing and help their team get better. I'm a big believer in growth mindset and people's ability to evolve, but this is one of those qualities I rarely see change. Either someone naturally cuts through the noise, or they create more of it. It's kind of hardwired. Simplifiers can't help but simplify. Complicators can't help but complicate. And while it might not always be obvious who's who at first, don't worry. If you ask the right questions, they'll show you exactly who they are. If you like that article or you work inside an investor-backed business, I hope you'll think about checking out Hello Operator on Substack. It's where I share all of the frameworks, tools, and mindsets that I use with my portfolio companies, and it's written just for you. Plus, it's free, and it always will be. You can find everything at hellooperator.substack.com. And if you have questions you'd like me to answer in my writing or on the podcast, shoot me a note at podcast@hellooperator.com. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.